Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to NTUC Learning Hub webinar for Skills Future Month 2021. Skills Future Singapore and NTUC Learning Hub are proud to present this online learning experience to help you upskill for a better career and a better life. Thank you so much for joining us early. The webinar will be starting soon. Now, while waiting for the rest of the attendees to join in, you may visit www.skillsfuturemonth.sg to find out more about the upcoming free webinars that you can also sign up for. Also, do stay all the way till the end because we do have a post-webinar survey, and 2 participants who complete the survey will win $10 fair price online vouchers. Now, for the busy professionals who prefer learning at your own pace, NTUC Learning Hub has made learning accessible anytime, anywhere through the online learning platform, LHub Go. In celebration of NTUC's 60th anniversary, NTUC Learning Hub continues to provide care and protection to members by providing upskilling opportunities. So NTUC members get to enjoy the exclusive LHub Go Grow 60 to support your lifelong learning journey anytime, anywhere. For a limited time only, instead of paying the usual price of $26 per year, NTUC members can now enjoy 60 popular courses at just $6 per year. For more information, simply click the website link available in the chat box to find out more. Meanwhile, sit back, relax, and I will return shortly to start the session. See you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Skills Future Month 2021. My name is Karen and I will be your host for today. Now, Skills Future Month brings forth an exciting myriad of opportunities for you to discover how you can enhance your skill set and employability. With more than 130 interactive learning events lined up, you will enjoy unparalleled access to a wealth of knowledge from our network of partners. Whether you are looking for a job or upgrading skills to give yourself that competitive edge, Skills Future Month is the perfect opportunity for you to get a head start on your lifelong learning journey. The events also provide easy access to information on how Skills Future and the SG United Jobs and Skills Package can help you to stay relevant in the new economy. Now, Skills Future Singapore and NTUC Learning Hub are glad to bring you this exciting online learning experience. Do stay all the way to the end because we do have a post-webinar survey, and 2 participants who complete the survey will win $10 fair price online vouchers. Today we have with us Eunice Yeo, Executive Director for Eco Business, and she will be telling us more about sustainability, frameworks, and developments. So if you've got any questions for her, then feel free to use the Q&A function at any time. Without further ado, I'll hand over the time to Eunice. Eunice, please.
Thank you, Karine. Nice to meet everyone here today. For the second time, I was presenting as well earlier this week on, on new careers and sustainability on Wednesday. And it was really a pleasure to be meeting so many of you with a lot of questions around sustainability and ESG. So today, my topic is slightly different. I'm going to be presenting about sustainability in the context of frameworks and development. And this really stems from the interest, I guess, amongst practitioners and yet to be practitioners who want to understand the landscape of sustainability, as well as the frameworks governing some of these, I guess, the issues on sustainability, especially from a business and institutional perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to proceed. And just so you know as well, if you have questions along the way, let's do it the same way as we did on Wednesday, which is if you could just type them into the Q&A box. I will leave about 10 to 15 minutes of my presentation at the end to tackle those questions as well. Okay. All right. So I'm going to kick off now and share my screen. So just hang with me. Okay. 1 second. You should be able to see my screen now. I hope you guys can. I'm not sure if you can. Okay, hang on. Okay, all right. So, all right, so I'm going to start, as mentioned, this is the title. I hope you all can see it. Before I begin, I thought we do it the same way as the last time as well, which is I'm going to start with a poll. The reason why this is important, at least, is for me is to understand at least who, all of you are, what your interest is with regards to the topic, and also, perhaps allows me to understand and focus on several things that may come up during the presentation. So, Nick, if you don't mind just showing the 2 questions, and if you could answer them. So the first question is, which statement most currently describes why you joined the session? All right, so which statement currently describes why you joined the session? I want to know more about how sustainability is managed. I'm keen to understand reporting in particular. I'm just here to listen, or I'm looking to work in sustainability and I want to find out more. And please don't forget, there is a second question below if you scroll down. Which aspect of sustainability interests you the most? Which aspect of sustainability interests you the most? Oh, interesting to see now. Okay. Just going to hang in there. We have probably more coming in, so just bear with me for a while. Okay, maybe we wait for another 15 seconds more. So for those who haven't answered the questions, please do. There are only 2. Okay. Okay, we'll do another 10 more seconds because it's still growing. Okay, all right. I think I'm just going to end the poll here. Cool. So this is who is listening at the moment. So it seems with regards to why you joined this session, it's quite a nice spread. It seems a lot of you are here just to listen and understand what this is all about. And the second one is you'd like to work in sustainability, but also there are some of you who are just keen to understand reporting in particular, and also wanting to know how this is managed. Then with regards, I don't know if you can see the results. Okay, I think you all can, right? And then with regards to what interests you most, it seems there are 2 that are leading. One is sustainability reporting. 27% of you are very interested in this topic. And the second one is ESG as a corporate strategy. So that's 18%. The others, sort of subtopics like climate risk, carbon emissions, and all that are around 10%. Okay, great. So this is really helpful. I'm going to stop sharing this. All right. Oh, sorry. These are the results. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for that participation. It was very interesting to see your feedback. These were the 2 questions asked, and this one as well. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move into the actual meat and potatoes of the presentation. But before that, perhaps allow me just 2 slides on a very quick introduction for those who don't know me and the organization I represent. I'm Eunice Yeo, Executive Director of Eco-Business. I come from sort of 17 plus years of a public-private sector background. I started out in marketing communications, and then I moved into sustainability about slightly over 10 years ago. And my geography, I would say expertise is in China and Southeast Asia. I shared this very quickly the last time, but this is a little bit about myself. I started out selling sort of commercialized yogurts for a French company called Danone in China. Thereafter, I again went back to China in 2011 or so, where I worked on a low carbon city project called the Sino-Singapore Tianjin Eco City project. Before that, I was helping with the Swiss government on investments between Switzerland and Southeast Asia. Then the next 10 years after that was really spent focusing on helping companies to understand their own sustainability impacts. And I worked at the UK-based consultancy called Corporate Citizenship for about 6 years. And last 3 years, I moved to Beijing, where I am today. And I work with EcoBusiness as the executive director, and I lead the media organization, really driving ESG issues in Asia. So a bit about EcoBusiness. We are Asia Pacific's leading media and business intelligence focused on sustainable development and responsible business. We are headquartered in Singapore, but today we have presence in Beijing, Manila, as well as in Zurich and New York. And we have correspondents in every major city in Asia Pacific. Most people know us for our news. And in case you have not heard about us, I think you should definitely check it out. It's eco-business.com. We dish out news on an hourly basis, to be honest. And actually, we are very proud of our journalism. But then the other things that we do as well is we work with organizations, large and small businesses, international organizations and governments on their sustainability journey, whether it's research consulting, white papers, or it's their own communication solutions as well. We help them to unravel the entire ESG, I would say, mandate. So that's more or less what we do. Again, if you want to sign up, this is completely free to access. And I hope that this also gives you a lot of knowledge that you might want to acquire as you move along the ESG journey. Okay. So what will we cover today? So this is what I decided that I think would be important for many of us who are on the journey. There are 4 topics that I will talk about. The first is the growing sustainability agenda in business in particular, why this is important, what the urgency is, and how business is changing even. Then I will move into ESG developments in Singapore and Asia in particular, followed by an overview of the global sustainability reporting frameworks. And last but not least, why reporting matters more than ever. And I hope for some of you, especially those who voted that you are keen on sustainability reporting, I hope the last 2 topics at least would be useful for you to at least gain a better perspective and foothold. Okay. All right. So without further ado, the first topic, growing sustainability agenda in business. So we are essentially, in an inflection point at the moment. We have basically 10 years to avert a catastrophic climate change outcome. Some of you might have read about the IPCC report, and it's basically the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, and they release a report every 10 years. Its latest 10-year report, which was considered an alarming code red for humanity, says that the evidence is irrefutable today. Greenhouse gas emissions are choking our planets and placing billions of people in danger. The global heating is affecting every region on Earth at the moment, with many of the changes becoming irreversible. This is increasingly so as well, as we can see a lot of mainstream media covering a lot of the reportage today and clearly stating that this is genuine, irrefutable evidence. The picture on the right shows the warning stripes. In case some of you might not have seen this before, I thought this was very, it's poignant for many of us, but also it's beautifully done. Of course, you can see the blue to the red, but this basically is indicating the world's average temperature in every year since the mid-19th century. The dark blue, of course, means the cooler, and red means warmer average years on average from mid-century until mid-19th century until today. So as you can see, we are really honing in onto the red, and not just red, but the dark red. And so the changing climate of the planet and the remarkable growth in human numbers is really just goes to show that a lot of it is got to do with human intervention. And this is very much related to our industrial revolution, but a lot of it has to be recognized and therefore acted upon as well. Okay. And so with this, there are a lot of telltale signs that there's an urgent crisis that needs to be averted as soon as possible. The picture here basically shows a couple of key indicators of the current situation. In summary, the carbon dioxide growth rates is nearly 20% higher than the 5 previous years. Sea levels are, of course, rising substantially faster than the average growth rates since 1993. There's unprecedented shrinking in the pole caps, and if you didn't know, of course, in the last 5 years was the hottest years on record. 2016 and 2020 were in fact the hottest years, and this is probably going to be the case continuing moving forward as well. So lots of red signals to us at the moment, and I am sure for many of us who are tuning in, you and us are very cognizant of what's happening, but as an individual, we also recognize we can only do that much. But that much can actually be very significant if we all collectively make an effort together. But how can we do it in the most significant way possible? This is where I think business would play a very key role. So sustainability is rising very quickly on board agendas everywhere. When you look at the news, mainstream business news today, this is just the last 3 weeks of news that I decided I'll just, pull the screenshots off and just show you the kind of messages that are being put across. There is, why is the ESG focused on private companies and not the government? Basically meaning to say businesses having actually to play a very key role because they are responsible for a very large proportion of the carbon emissions today. Extreme weather, blowing out catastrophe with insurance losses up to 40 billion. And why the IPCC report is a must-read for corporate boards. All these news, really just points to the fact that if you are a CEO or CFO of a major company, say in insurance, and you are reading about extreme, catastrophe, indicating huge losses for your own type of company, not only would you activate your actuarial team, your revenue modeling team to get cracking on insurance claims from such risks, you'd be panicking about your own shareholders' interests as well. And so I thought one way to maybe just bring us back to where it all began is maybe to have perhaps to look at a statement from Milton Friedman. And some of you who study economics might recognize him. He was a very famous American economist who received the Nobel Prize in 1976 in economic sciences for his research. And Friedman was well known for his monetary policy, of course, but he argued for free trade, for smaller government, and a steady flow of money supply into a growing economy. And this is what he said: the social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits. That's it. And his arguments, of course, is that only human beings have a moral responsibility for their actions. And so it is the manager's responsibility to act solely in the interest of their shareholder. Every other issue on the social front or problems is really the problem of the state rather than the corporate manager. In simple terms, this basically means that actually businesses' job is just to give money back to its shareholders, dividends to shareholders, and it's the state up to the government to really manage everything else. Now, the thing is, things have changed over time. And when you talk about businesses today, you are buying products, you're buying goods, you're investing in stocks and things. All of us have a role to play when it comes to influencing, especially with the rise of social media. All of us are very much interconnected. And so when it comes to businesses being responsible and you paying your dollar to show a sign of support, it basically also brings in a lot of other stakeholders today, not just shareholders. So customers, be it from procurement in a supply chain, retailers, or even us as consumers, suppliers, whether it's the most immediate supplier or the suppliers of the supplier and the supplier. So that's first tier, second tier, third tier. Employees, current employees, future hires, especially the fresh talents you hire from graduate programs. And the civic society, of course, the NGOs, media, the public, all of us are very much part of stakeholder groups that care about what businesses do today. And a company that has recognized this very early on is Unilever. And I thought I'd bring up this example because they were quite unique in this space over 10 years ago, where they recognized that because of the products that they launched and the way they impacted on many other billions of people's lives through, their shampoo, through their soaps, through their ice creams, through their laundry detergents and all that, they realize that they are impacting not just their consumers through responsible marketing, for example. They were also influencing the way they purchase from their own suppliers. And their CEO at that time, he's since moved on, but he was phenomenal in making the statement and putting it out there, saying this is a great time for brands, which can be a beacon of trust for consumers. These days, CEOs don't just get judged by how well their share prices are doing, but also by what impact they are having on society. He also went on to really challenge the notion of quarterly reporting. As you would know, many listed companies care about quarterly reporting because if the numbers fall, they might, lose shareholders along the way, or they might lose investors, even retail or institutional investors. And the way the ticker tape runs is really manages their own business itself. But Paul Pullman felt that was not the way to go. And so he challenged that notion. And so he also put into place what it means to drive value for a business and its people and its consumers. And so they established a bit of a testing mechanism where they launched brands that were considered sustainable and launched traditional brands that were not considered entirely sustainable. And so the sustainable brands of Unilever were basically positioned in the sense that rather they were created such that their sourcing of the materials and all that were responsibly done. The people that worked in that brand ensured that they followed the guidelines of ESG or sustainability, and they found, in fact, that 50% of their brands did far better than those that were not deemed particularly sustainable. That actually sealed their overall mission to become to strive that all of their brands were focused on this mission. And Unilever, over the next 10 years after that, really put out their own targets to ensure that they reach those targets. And over time, they were really regarded as a brand, not just one that focuses on this space, but also is resilient when it comes to risks that might occur, that might impact the brand over the long term as well. And so this has been incredibly encouraging, and they kind of set the gold standard for many other companies that followed today. And so with this, I'm just going to move very quickly into how that has impacted Asia in particular, and Singapore, of course. So what is influencing change in Asia? So East Asia and Southeast Asia have been experiencing phenomenal growth in the past 3 decades. With stronger economies and greater GDP growth, our population, of over 2 billion, depending on how you demarcate the numbers, have really enjoyed better standards of living, higher education, even better employment benefits. And in terms of sustainability, there has been a remarkable development as well in the past decade. China, of course, being the largest market out there, it's today the largest green finance market outside of Europe, and even its own green bond market is already surpassing that of the US this year. China and Japan both have set ambitious carbon neutral targets that promise new investment opportunities, as well as tighter regulation on pollutive industries. And so, with all that momentum building, we want to understand as well, what are the kind of reasons for this change taking place. And so I thought I'd sort of bring it down to my famous five reasons, 5 misconceptions from the last presentation I had, but 5 reasons why change is happening quickly in Asia. Firstly, China and increasingly the rest of Asia have become important export markets in the world's supply chain. As you can see here in this picture, the current share of our global supply chain in Asia is slightly over half. You can see there in the top right hand, China 26.3% and Asia about 21.4%. So that's slightly over half. And this is, despite the pandemic, despite COVID, it's actually projected to grow even stronger in the next 2 years or so. So our markets are doing incredibly well, especially in the global supply chain. But so it's environmental impact. So global supply chains are definitely a major driver of trade, investment, growth in Southeast Asia. But yet, there is, of course, a growing recognition of the need to reduce the carbon emissions as well coming out of these supply chains. So the race to net zero has therefore become an important considerations for many key industries out there that are part of the supply chain. There was a report that was that showed this chart, and I thought was interesting. It was presented by the World Economic Forum as well as the Boston Consulting Group in Davos recently, and it revealed that tackling supply chain emissions can transform the global fight against climate change, and it explores the top 8 global supply chains, as you can see here, which together account for more than 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions. This report shows that the investments towards end-to-end decarbonization solutions of our supply chains, which can easily and readily be deployed today, would add as little as 1 to 4% to end consumer costs in the medium term, which means we as consumers would pay as little as 1 to 4% more, just so that the entire world's, at least half of the world's global supply chain can effectively decarbonize. Now, this is a great opportunity for many of us involved in supply chain management, but that also means that a collective action is required across many different industries, part of this business, to really think about how can they deploy decarbonization actions as quickly as possible as a form of investment. The second reason why there is this big change happening in Asia Pacific is that ESG regulations are kicking in hard and fast across the markets right now. Here I just showed 6 markets that I've seen a lot of change. Singapore, in which the comply or explain requirement already took effect about 3 years ago. Malaysia, the same, actually the year before, and they're still continuing to drive a lot of activities to encourage Malaysian companies to act on their ESG disclosure. Japan, actually, interestingly, only requires governance to be reported. ESG issues at the moment should be reported if only deemed by investors. I found that interesting because they didn't quite, follow the same kind of regulations as the other Asian markets. But that said, Japan's regulations are just kicked in this year as well. They tightened it up, and I foresee that they will continue to tighten up some more as well. China, of course, they have 2 stock exchanges, Shenzhen and Shanghai, both of which have already mandated greater reporting standards for ESG risks. South Korea, more or less doing along the same lines. Hong Kong, I felt, was very interesting because they were the first to launch their comply or explain requirement in 2016 by their stock exchange there. But they again updated it in 2020 for all listed companies. And this year, they announced that all financial institutions should disclose on full-fledged science-based climate risks by 2023. And this is expected to go across more industries until 2025. So safe to say the central banks, the regulatory bodies, as well as the stock exchanges, of course, are very much part of this movement today. They are shaping the way companies, especially listed ones, but the ones that are about to be listed as well, to get on the bandwagon and start reporting on their ESG reporting. And of course, this is encouraging for a lot of other industries, or rather a lot of other side ancillary type of industries that are going alongside this kind of regulations. But safe to say, we're going to see a continuous tightening of measures as well, not just in Asia, but across many parts of the world too. Okay. So the third reason is that Asia is already feeling the impacts of climate change. Half of the world's natural disasters are already occurring in this part of the world, from the Philippines to China to Australia. In the last 12 months, no country today is spared from the effects of the polar caps melting. And we are obviously witnessing very erratic weather patterns that is set to become even more frequent as we move along. So the impact on our lives, we felt in different ways. The effects, the physical effects is quite straightforward. We imagine it already to be heating, especially in a very hot country like Singapore. Can you imagine temperatures going up by another 2 to 4 degrees, which is already set to be the case at the moment if we don't do serious measures to address that? Coastal flooding across affecting real estate, affecting infrastructure. And of course, industries such as tourism, as you can see this picture that was taken of a beautiful coral reef that had already been destroyed in the last 5 years or so. This is obviously already taking place in the Great Barrier Reef, which boasts the biggest share of the coral reefs in the world today. We are seeing unprecedented bleaching of these coral reefs already. So that is obviously affecting many other livelihoods as well. And of course, the sad thing of this is that those who contribute least to greenhouse gases, the poorer countries in this regard, will be most impacted by climate change. This chart is sad, of course, because the reality of this also borderlines on social inequality. The ones who have no power to make changes are the ones who will inevitably be affected by climate change. And so the fourth reason is that ESG is fast becoming an access to capital. I mentioned earlier that Asia is witnessing significant developments in ESG. Green bonds towards investments that are battling climate change and of course pursuing sustainable development are set to be growing and keep growing. Global sustainable funds already attracted about 185 billion in the first quarter of 2021, and that was up from 17% from the previous quarter. This trend is even expected to continue, and this is just, I think, right now the main message that we are telling the financial industry is that ESG is now a mainstream investment asset, and it is time for us to start looking at it with a closer lens. Yeah. And the fifth reason is that new market opportunities is available everywhere, especially in Southeast Asia. This is a chart that shows Southeast Asia's clean energy market, and it is becoming one of the most successful clean energy transition stories today. As you can see here, this is just the one on the right shows installed solar capacity in Southeast Asia from 2010 to 2019. Just look at the phenomenal growth of solar capacity being built up across the region right now. Singapore has a sliver of that, but the other markets, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and especially Vietnam, is really seeing phenomenal growth. And when it comes to the kind of policies that are coming up, regulatory or fiscal incentives from public financing, the left chart will show you the kind of policies that are already developing across the Southeast Asian markets from Philippines all the way to Brunei. And you can see the spread of policies already taking place. This is extremely encouraging because it just means that the financial bodies as well as the government regulations are coming hand in hand to ensure that there is greater capacity being built, but also greater support for further businesses to take on more renewable energy in their own investments as well. All right, so I'm going to move on to Singapore, and just a quick check on time. All right, I think we're okay. All right, so with regards to Singapore, ignore the amount of detail in this slide, but I think the main message here is that we started out as a garden city program back in 1967. With a very visionary person, our own founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. And since then, I think, Lee Kuan Yew himself put in a very important message about water, which today has been the strongest point for Singapore when it comes to sustainability. The way he positioned the survival of water has today been referenced by many other experts around the world as a classic case, a fantastic case study on how a country so small with no resources to water can actually enable itself to be water sufficient in the years to come as well. And so that was just the start of many things to come. But today, safe to say Singapore is on a very, very interesting roadmap now when it comes to sustainability. And in 2020, I would say that the most recent policy in this space has been the Green Plan. The president's message about boosting 55,000 jobs in sustainability, but also I would say the boosting of electric vehicles, replacing internal combustion engines, meaning to say that we will soon have more electric vehicles on the road and actually all of them will be electric vehicles by 2040 or so. Okay, so lots of very exciting, I would say, developments in Singapore. And of course, with regards to the Green Plan goals, lots of great targets, as you can see here, from city in nature to sustainable living to having a resilient future, energy reset, green economy, green government. It's quite a holistically set out plan with lots of great targets that you can see here. From every household having, to live just within a 10-minute walk from a park, meaning to say that you will still be able to stay cool and dry, with sheltered, so we don't have to depend so much on on air conditioning to boosting of entire economies today. It's all been very encouraging. And this is basically just a slide showing the regulatory developments in Singapore in particular, from environment to governance to social. As I mentioned earlier, the Green Plan has been probably the most significant one from a nation perspective. But when it comes to greenhouse gas or carbon emissions, Singapore doesn't have the kind of net zero target by 2050 plan, but it does have a more sectoral approach to decarbonizing, which is actually not a bad thing, because the truth is every industry has a very different greenhouse gas intensity challenge. So, from power to utilities to data centers today, these are very, very high intensity sectors which have to decarbonize as quickly as possible. But the other ones that are probably less energy intensive might have a different approach altogether. So Singapore takes a slightly more balanced approach to this. But that said, there are a lot of environmental regulations that are kicking in, from electric vehicles to mandatory waste reporting to packaging. These are the ones that are very, very key for any of us who are, studying the space. But also carbon tax, which was launched about 3-4 years ago, might continue to be further scrutinized as we move along. Governance has always been important, but Singapore prides itself on giving a little bit of leeway as well to companies to let them breathe. But that said, I think Singapore companies in general are quite rule compliant, and so the sustainability reporting and code of corporate governance ones have more or less been in place for some time. Social front, I would say, from my perspective, is very stable. There has not been a lot of changes with regards to, say, fair employment, MOM's Employment Act, or even the Workplace Injury Compensation Act. But that said, I think, with rising interests in social inequality today, especially with regards to migrant workers issues and diversity and inclusion, we might see a little bit more in this space in years to come. Okay. All right, so that's more or less an overview of Singapore's landscape as well as Southeast Asia. I hope this gives you a great overview as well in terms of what you think might be interesting from your own professional perspective. I'm just going to very quickly move into global reporting frameworks now. So this is more, So this is more or less an overview of sustainability frameworks. And those of you who are already studying this space might already find these logos, quite familiar. But I'm just going to differentiate this with the others that are also in the scene. When I started out in sustainability, I found it very challenging to understand the whole landscape of sustainability, and especially with regards to disclosure, because I couldn't quite put my head around which was doing what. So I kind of set out to put it out here myself, and please forgive me if you might want to challenge some of them. I'd be happy to have a further conversation on this, just to sort of differentiate this for the beginners and the average learner out there. So the global reporting frameworks on the left side are the frameworks that most businesses, especially the listed ones, are referring to these days as part of their own mandatory reporting or voluntary reporting. This is the go-to standards, you can say, depending on which countries you are and also which industry you are from. But GRI, SASB are the two, what many consider in the industry rival frameworks. Essentially, one is developed from the Netherlands, GRI, and the other one from SASB is an American-based framework that was developed in accordance to the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. Two of them are very different fundamentally, but actually they are also quite the same in many regards. I will go into some detail later. TCFD, or rather Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, came about in the market about 3-4 years ago. And it was actually a Michael Bloomberg initiative that became very, very influential. And so today, a lot of the high intensity, energy intensity companies actually report against this framework, especially if you are very well aware of how climate-related risks are affecting your balance sheets. Integrated reporting is a more global, it is a global framework, but it sort of considers how the fact that traditionally companies have been doing financial reporting, and if it were to consider sustainability as a more holistic viewpoint, how would that fit into its current financial reporting? So it tries to sort of seeks to evaluate capital in different forms, social capital, human capital, etc., and put that a number to it and then report against it. So that's what we call the global reporting frameworks. The middle bucket of indices-driven frameworks are frameworks that are related to companies, especially in the public markets, who very often would already be reporting using the left bucket type of frameworks, but then are also scrutinized by a lot of financial indices such as Dow Jones. Dow Jones is one, the other one might be Sustainalytics, the other ones might be the Morgan Stanley MSCI. These, I would say financial indices are tracking a lot of these data as well, and so they would dish out industry-related type of questionnaires. So GRESB, for example, you can see GRESB is a real estate type of index or a questionnaire. CDP stands for Carbon Disclosure Project, and they focus a lot on carbon, but today they've gone into waste, into water, forestry as well. And then Sustainalytics and Dow Jones are very similar. I would say they look at the holistic side of things, but that said, they're extremely rigorous in their processes. And myself, when I was a consultant, it took every company a very long time to get through even one questionnaire. And on average, for the large companies, some of them had to tackle, from 10 to 15 different types of questionnaires every year. So it's extremely taxing, but sometimes also very rewarding because they understand finally what they are managing because they measure it as well. And then the third bucket here is on global guidance frameworks. And as you can see here, the SDG global goals, what they call it, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, ISO 26000, as well as the UNGC 10 Business Principles. To me, these are very principles-based, slightly more normative in disclosure requirements. So they expect you to sort of disclose, sign off by your CEO or CFO. There is some targets in there, but the thing is, I find it sometimes a little bit more, I would say they're broader in approach and less granular in nature. But they're all very important, of course, and at the end of the day, for every company, you do need to choose which ones would suit you best. Okay, and so which frameworks are most widely adopted? Not surprising, I'm sure many of you would know this, but GRI is by far the most used framework in the world at the moment. It is reported by, here, as you can see, 95% of organizations who are disclosing their reports publicly. Followed by SASB, the American-based framework, IIRC, CDP, TCFD, and CDSB. I find this chart also slightly misleading because does it mean that 95% of them report and, okay, so basically this chart is going to tell you as well that a lot of companies are reporting against 2 to 3 frameworks at the moment. This is actually the problem with reporting, which many of us who are in this space are very frustrated about, is the fact that there are repetitive frameworks that is costing a lot of time and effort, which don't seem to gel or sync. And so when you are reporting against one, you actually need to switch your mind, switch your measurement, and report against the other to ensure that you abide and adhere to the requirements as a whole. This is what's making even the investors frustrated because they want one single number when they judge an issue: carbon, water, waste. What is your metrics there? Can it be applied across your, across the various different industries, for example? And this is the way they feel they can measure apple to apple, which absolutely makes sense. But at the moment, it's not the case. So this is where we are at the moment. We foresee there will be more coming together of indices or frameworks, but at the moment, we are seeing a lot of repetitive and overlapping reporting disclosures right now. Okay, all right, just very quickly, because I'm very conscious of time, frameworks, GRI standards. So this is what it is. Basically, it's there are universal standards which ask you a lot about your company and what you do, tell us about how you manage your organization and things. And then there's the topic specific framework, which is 200, 300, 400. 200 is economic, 300 is environment, and 400 is social. Depending on your material issues or issues that are very important to your company and your stakeholders, governed by these principles, which is materiality, completeness, inclusiveness of your stakeholder, and context of sustainability, they obviously expect that you report on several issues depending on your industry. Then, of course, defining report quality as well. This is extremely important, and I find very much underplayed today. A lot of reports are out there right now, but you cannot guarantee if they're accurate, if they're comparable, if they're reliable, if they're even clear, because you can't understand it because sometimes it's so verbose. And especially the last one, which is balance. A lot of reports tell you great stuff about the company, but it doesn't tell you the areas in which they have challenges on. And this is actually what GRI advocates very strongly, which I very much agree with, because most of the time you don't want really to know how well they're doing. Actually, what you want to know is where they're struggling at and how they're tackling those issues. Okay, so this in a nutshell is sort of the GRI's reporting issues. There's a lot of information here, so I don't expect you to read all of that, but this is how it would look like when it comes to disclosures itself. So if your own material issue is around anti-corruption, there are specific indicators there that point to confirmed incidents of corruption that you need to report against, and this is how GRI sort of expects companies to start disclosing on. If your issue is related to, say, product health and safety, there are very specific requirements on, say, total number of incidents, were there any deaths and things that you have to report against. And then another one could be, say, on waste management, tell us about the total amount of weight of your waste, how much of that is hazardous, for example, and things, and how are you transporting the waste to be managed as well. So this is more or less how GRI disclosure works. I will be running a masterclass with NTUC Learning Hub as well in very soon. And if you're interested in this aspect of how disclosure should be done, just get in touch with me, and I'm happy to give you the information about the masterclass too. Okay, SASB. SASB is an American-based framework, as I mentioned to you, and the key focus about SASB is this: it's Materiality Map. It really helps companies, depending on which industry you are at, to know which issues you need to focus on. And then if you choose on the top bar here, your industry, you'll be able to tell which aspects you probably need to start focusing on and how you're going to start measuring that. Okay, that's as simple as that. And then IRC, I won't go into so much detail because it's really quite broad, I would say, but essentially they focus on 6 capitals there: financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, and natural capital. How this integrates into the business is what they focus on, and how you eventually report against that through numbers is the other challenge there. Bear in mind that this is not a 2-in-1 financial and sustainability report. Many reporters think that as long as I do my sustainability report and my financial report, I lump them together in one document, it's an integrated report. It isn't, and please remember that it's not as straightforward as that. There's a lot more to it, and so if you need to find out more, I suggest that you look at IRC's website as well to understand this better. Okay, and then TCFD. TCFD is as I mentioned, is the climate-related financial disclosures. They are managed by 4 big chunks here: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics. They expect every organization, especially ones who already understand what climate risk means to their company, to disclose alongside these 4 buckets. And these are the recommended disclosures that they would like you to have. Just in lieu of time, I know there's not enough time to go through all this in detail, but again, if you're interested, the masterclass, we will go into this in more detail as well. Okay. All right, I talked a lot about all these different frameworks, but essentially the most important bottom line that all of you should know about is this. Number 1, stakeholders. Your stakeholders are, as I talked to you about before, customers, your suppliers, the public, the NGOs, the governments, and all that. They all have a point of view about your organization and how they interact with you. It could be from your products, it could be from the fact that you invested in them, different ways. We need to listen to all these stakeholders' points of view and map it out alongside your potential in business as well. When you map this out, the top right-hand quadrant is what we call the most material side of your business. This is what we call the sweet spot, and materiality is where it plays out the most significantly in every reporting. Okay, so when you are looking at sustainability reporting, the most time you need to spend is actually to define what your material issues are. And so here is like how it's illustrated. You have lots of topics and everything, but essentially the top right-hand quadrant is where we should focus our efforts most on. And I'm just going to show you two maps so you can see how that plays out. So this is Unilever's materiality map, and where it's very high on its interests and how it's going to manage its issues, manage its investments, is determined by this map. This is also why corporate planning, strategy, risk management, finance teams in every organization have to play a very key role in mapping out this as well, because they would influence the way you manage these issues from a risk perspective. If you ask me, finance needs to have their own mergers and acquisitions or investments also thinking also plastered onto this materiality map, so that they know exactly the kind of investments they have to make in the moving forward. So for Unilever, it's climate change, packaging and risk, packaging and waste, water, human rights, health and hygiene, sustainable and responsible sourcing, and trusted products and ingredients transparency. So after all that it's done in terms of its I guess interviews with the stakeholders and things, they found that these issues are going to be the most significant to them in the next 10 years or so. And so when it comes to another one like Airbus, for example, of course, packaging is not a very important issue for it. It's not material to the company, but technology and innovation is. Environmentally responsible products, product quality and responsibility, as well as health and safety, were how it defined as being very important. I imagine in this space here, the whole climate change issue is very important, but it probably didn't define it that way. But so this is also why for everyone who's managing your own organization's materiality map, the way you define your issues is also very, very key. How granular do you go into, or how broad do you take it? Would be a very important exercise to undertake. Okay. All right. Last but not least, why reporting matters now more than ever. As I talked to you about, who cares about businesses being responsible today? Everyone, right? But there's one more segment of people that that I sort of hinted alongside, but didn't quite go into detail. It is the financiers. The biggest game-changing thing that has happened in the last 5 years is the way ESG has just exploded in the financial markets, and how this can really influence change moving forward as well. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay, so if you can see here, SGX found in a survey that 90% of institutional investors seek ESG information. 700 public listed companies in Singapore today, they are all feeding information in which, as I told you about earlier, the financial indices are picking up and ranking them, rating them and things. And all this data is being sold to these guys, who are the institutional investors, BlackRock, Norge Bank, Aviva, CalPERS, BNP Paribas. These are the guys who are making sense of that data and telling everyone else where you should be investing your money in to ensure that you can combat risks, but also make the most out of your buck today. This is incredibly important because there's a lot of money right here that about, I think valuated at between 60 to 80 trillion dollars very soon. This is a massive amount of assets under management just on the ESG front today. This is how it looks like basically for every, I would say analyst on a Bloomberg terminal who are buying, selling, making recommendations, doing research, to their bosses and things. They are all looking at this ticker tape, I would say, of each and every stock. And they assess it basically now, not just on finances today, but if you look at this right now, environment, social governance. Obviously better is green, for them, red is worse. They can immediately tell whether this stock is to buy or to sell. So basically what has happened is that Bloomberg has infiltrated the financial world and put in more mechanisms for you to make a more informed choice about whether the stock is a risk or not. And how they've incorporated a lot of environment, social, and governance factors into the indicators as well. This is what has really been a game changer in the last 5 years or so. So why do they care about ESG? As I mentioned, because it is a real risk and as well as a real opportunity. Just very quickly, climate change is going to crush a lot of real estate and investments because of the flooding. As you can imagine, if you were built alongside that riverbank in the picture that you see, there are going to be massive physical risks to you, but also from a regulatory front, transitional risks will hit you. So you kind of need to start to avert these risks by investing in things that you know will be able to tide through some of these climate change patterns. 8 out of 10 of the most high value rates today are all going to be subject to sea level rise, and all of them are in Asia, in particular Hong Kong. So Hong Kong's real estate today is in a very, very precarious state because a lot of them are going to be just submerged by water today. And if you're an investor looking at that, chances are you'll be very alarmed, and you probably want to pull out your investments too if you wanted to think long and hard about the long-term valuation of these properties. So in a nutshell, there is a lot of growing opportunity, and because the scope of sustainability is growing, as you can see in this triple bottom line chart, social issues, environment issues, government issues, economic issues, the pie is really growing, as we all know already. But this is really interesting because we all talked a lot about intangibles today when it comes to investments. And this chart basically shows that from 1975 to 2018, the largest market cap companies today are all evaluated now by their intangibles more than their tangibles. And the intangibles traditionally had always been stuff like, brand name, brand value, brand reputation. But more and more so today, we are seeing that intangibles is in the form of everything that is ESG related. If you look at this, financial capital, 30%, intangible capital, 70%. And if you look at all the things that is under intangibles that was traditionally brand reputation, today, they're all around ESG risks and opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to close because I know I'm short of time, but this is basically just tell you that there is really immense opportunity right now because the financial market is really moving all of that and valuating it into capital. And so if we are smart about making our investments as well, we would know where to put our money for a long-term perspective. Okay. Last but not least, as I said, I'm building a masterclass program on ESG for Singapore, and also with with the mindset on the region. So if you are interested in this, please contact me at junis.yo, and I'm happy to share more, but also to listen to what you'd like moving forward. Okay, that's more or less it. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to take the questions now. Okay, maybe I'll just go here, have a look. Okay. So a couple of questions now. Where is there a governing body that is aligning all frameworks to one standard? At the moment, there is no governing body that is aligning all the frameworks to one standard, although I wish there would be. I would say the governments and institutional investors are putting a lot of pressure on the reporting framework bodies to start to talk together. So that's already very helpful. So you see a lot of governments, and even the World Economic Forum's founder, Schwab, has even came out and said that, you guys need to find a way to work together because it is not helping the situation. So it's been very encouraging. Okay, our reporting frameworks linked with certifications, example, B Corp, linked with B Corp. A company that is B Corp certified would still need to choose another reporting framework for sustainability reporting. That's a great question. If you were a smaller organization and you certified yourselves in B Corp, to be honest, in my opinion, you would have answered almost all the questions related to, say, GRI or SASB already. That's hopefully useful for you because B Corp is very robust too. It's great. It's quite straightforward because they ask you lots of questions, and it's you just answer those questions, but you need to have policies in place to back you up. It's a very similar process for GRI. The only thing different probably is that GRI wants you to figure out your own material issues, whereas for B Corp, that's not necessarily the case. And I think B Corp is robust enough for you to, to market that to whoever stakeholder you're trying to position it to as well. Okay, which framework is commonly or popular used in Asia? I give you the answer is definitely GRI, and it might be GRI for a while until things change. How does audit for these reporting work when companies publish them? How does audit for these companies work when companies publish them? Great question. Audit is a very interesting one because I find it extremely misleading sometimes. The reason why I use the word misleading is because whenever I see a company saying that it's done an audit on its sustainability report, the first thing I do is to go and look at the report and look at the audit statement. because chances are the audit statement itself would tell you that they perhaps only selected several indicators or several issues to audit against and not the entire report. They would have paid good money to have done that report, but at the same time, it's extremely expensive. And so they might choose maybe only a carbon indicator or a water indicator and said, okay, let me just get my auditors to look at that and audit that bit and not the rest of the report. So in a way, it's not really an entirely audited report. You've only audited a couple of indicators in there. And so, but it's, of course, it's very important, because when I spoke to one of a very important, I'd say, an industry analyst looking at ESG, and I asked them how exactly do they evaluate audits today. They say, okay, when I analyze a company and when they have done a sustainability report against GRI, I give them 5 points. If they have done GRI plus, the more comprehensive one, 5 more points. If they've done audit, if I see an audit statement, I give them 5 points. So that kind of doesn't help the situation as well, because they've just lumped audit all into one and just gave them the full 5 points anyway. So sometimes it can be quite misleading. Okay. What corporates need to do to fulfill ESG? Sorry, I didn't quite understand that question, but I assume what you mean is how can they ensure that they are ESG compliant? It really, there's no right or wrong answer. At the end of the day, I guess the gold standard that everyone would try to strive towards is that your business is well managed and you are sure that your materials, your business, your operations are reflecting a responsible business. I think in a nutshell, that's how I would define it. But getting there, in my opinion, really requires CEO level engagement. If any of you are here, focusing on sustainability and you are trying to influence ESG integration in your own business, I think one way to really try to get that going is to get your CEO or CFO, or at least the board, to really understand these issues and try to think hard in terms of how can we manage this more carefully moving forward. Are there several low-hanging fruits that we can apply as well? Okay, hope that helps. All right. Hui Hyang had a question. What is the current landscape of reporting with respect to labor? Are there enough sustainability reporting companies and specialists, or is the industry already saturated? Okay, hang on. Nick, please don't remove it yet because I need to read it again. What is the current landscape of reporting with regards to labor? I think my short answer to this is that in Singapore, I find that a lot of companies who report are very comfortable reporting to labor issues. The reason is because maybe a lot of them are construction companies, real estate companies, in which labor is a very key material issue to them because they contract, workers and stuff. And they would be very comfortable disclosing the numbers because they have the numbers. Say, for example, how many accident rates, what measures are you doing to protect your migrant workers? Are you giving them proper ventilation in their quarters? Do you withhold passports, which I hope they don't? Things like that. So, the labor issues, actually, a lot of them are very well managed, or at least they have what is available to be answered, to be disclosed. Are there enough reporting companies or specialists, or is the market already saturated? Absolutely not. There's a dearth of reporting companies supporting the landscape at the moment, and I think there will be more to come. Okay, Hui Hyang, I hope I answered your question. All right, so can ISO standards help the organization to set up system, processes, and practices? Absolutely. So ISO has several ESG related standards. I showed you one earlier, which was 26,000, but there's also 14,001, 14,002 that are related to environment standards as well. And then I think it's 14026, if I forgot. Another one that's really focused on supply chain as well. So yes, absolutely, these standards are very much linked to sustainability. I feel that perhaps ISO maybe just doesn't have one that's, say, like completely ESG driven, but that said, it can be applied into the GRI format or the SASB format as well. Okay. What is the current progress in mandatory ESG reporting here in Singapore? There is basically there is compliance, meaning to say a lot of companies are doing it as a tick box measure. All of them are saying what SGX is asking them to do, but the quality of the report is of a significant issue. So SGX might even tell you they're happy with the progress made, but they are really concerned about the fact that it's a wishy-washy report that doesn't really address material ESG risks at the moment. So quality is an issue today, not just in Singapore, but across the world at the moment. The reporting standards are poor. Okay, and maybe just, I think that we're short of time, so I'll just take 2 more questions, okay? How should we position the conventional CSR into ESG framework for businesses? Great question. I personally think there's a huge misconception in what CSR is and what ESG is. And I talked about that in my last training. I tried to, sort of debunk the myth about CSR, but essentially CSR is very much philanthropic driven. It focuses a lot on the companies, external efforts to want to help, with issues such as education, healthcare, even the arts, culture and things, not really related to the company's core business. ESG is everything that's related to a company's core business. This is where the distinction has to be made, okay? And last question, I'll take a very short one, is what are some of the ways to overcome greenwashing? Greenwashing is a real big problem. And even for us, we really face a lot of challenges having to scrutinize companies today on their greenwashing tactics, especially when it comes to communications, because it's all very, very, the Chinese word we use is xu, which is very blur, it's not clear. And what we want is clear-cut information that ideally should be science-based, evaluated with numbers. At the moment, we don't see that. And this is where there is a lot of opportunity. Okay, thank you so much. I think I'm running out of time, so I will have to close this, but your questions are extremely important. Nick, if you don't mind, on the back end, could you just save these questions because they are very valuable for the masterclass that we're running. So I hope that you don't lose these questions when we close the webinar session. Okay, so without further ado, I think just thank you again for everybody's time. Super encouraging, and I really enjoyed listening to all of you. Please get in touch with me either on LinkedIn or on email or whatever, and I'm happy to facilitate further discussions as we move forward. Okay, thank you, and have a good day.
A very big thank you to our speaker and to each and every single one of you for being such a wonderful audience. So ladies and gentlemen, we're now at the end of the webinar and would love to receive your feedback. So once you exit this session, you will be shown a Zoom survey link on your browser. Simply complete this short survey and you may just be one of our 2 lucky participants to bring home $10 fair price online vouchers. Now, if you do wish to go for more in-depth training, then please visit NTUC Learning Hub website to find out more about their courses. For busy professionals who prefer learning at your own pace, NTUC Learning Hub has made learning accessible anytime, anywhere through an online learning platform, LHub Go. Also, remember to check out our other Skills Future Month 2021 webinars at www.skillsfuturemonth.sg and follow us on our social media channels to be notified of future events and promotions. Once again, thank you so much and have a fantastic day ahead.